Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Go ahead, sit down. You guys are so sweet to me every single time I come here. It's just fabulous. That woke me up. I drag my feet in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I had one woman say, Mr. Koukl, you must have a great quiet time in the morning. I said, frankly, ma'am, before my first cup of coffee, I'm an atheist, so. I just had one of those, do you puncture the little thing and drips into that? Those are fabulous. I just had one into the back there, and now I'm starting to feel a little better. Actually, right now I'm a Jehovah's Witness, but second service, I'll be fine this morning, right? I get a chance to do a lot of fun conferences. Most of them are focused on a bunch of really smart people, not me, other people like PhDs and professors and academics and people who really think through all the hard issues, and I get to work and maybe translate some things for our people through stand to reason. But these are the smart guys that come for a weekend, and you've had some weekends like that in the past where you've got the guys giving you all the information, they're stepping up, they're answering the challenges that are being made against our convictions in our culture today, and there's a lot of them. In fact, we're getting a full court press from just about every single area. It's okay, we got the smart people that have stepped up and knocked those softballs out of the park. We got nothing to worry about. We've got the answers. However, if you're sitting in the audience and you're listening and you're taking notes, by the end of the day, you feel a little overwhelmed, right? You feel like that kid in the Far Side cartoon who's sitting in math class and all the math equations are on the board. And he raised his hand and he said, Professor, could I please be excused? My brain is full, that kind of thing. What are you going to do with all this information? And whether you're at the conference or not, if you're reading some stuff, you go to the website, you listen to Pastor Rick and others of your trainers here on campus and your pastors, and you're gathering this good information, and you want to use it as a follower of Christ to reach out in the community and to make a difference for the kingdom's sake. But how do you do that? There's something missing in these conferences characteristically. The thing that's missing is a bridge from the content to the conversation, a bridge from the, scholarship to the relationship. How do you take that stuff that you know, the things that you've been learning, and kind of integrate them into a conversation in a casual way, a way that doesn't make you look weird, and it doesn't, and it helps your engagements to look more like diplomacy than D-Day, okay? Well, that's why they asked me to come to these conferences, and I usually give the final talk, and I lay out for them in that final talk what it looks like to have a bridge, and that's what I want to talk with you about this morning. So I see a lot of pens and papers out, and I'm glad you're going to take some notes, because this is going to be possibly the most practical talk you will ever hear as a follower of Christ with regards to communicating your convictions effectively with other people. So as you're getting ready to take some notes, I want to say something, though, at the outset that may surprise you. And in fact, it's controversial because when I say this, I have some real important friends of mine that push back kind of hard, but I'm going to stick behind it because I've seen the wisdom and the impact it has on other people. So here's the statement, and then I'll explain it. I've been a Christian 40 years, been in this kind of enterprise almost the whole time, been in talk radio 25 years. However, I never have it as a goal when I begin to engage somebody in some way that I hope will have a spiritual impact. I never have it as a goal to lead that person to Christ. Well, that's different. In fact, I don't even have it as a goal in that conversation to necessarily even get to the gospel. Now, why would I say something as bizarre as that? Do I care that this person comes to Christ? Absolutely. It's vital. His eternal destiny, her eternal destiny, depends upon it. Do I not care about the gospel? The gospel is the power of salvation to everyone who believes. These things are absolutely vital, but I understand something about the nature of the culture that we find ourselves in right now. I became a Christian during the Jesus movement in the 70s. You could talk about Jesus everywhere and everybody understood what you're talking about. This time is over with. People recognize the name. They understand words. They understand. They recognize words like saved and salvation and heaven and hell and faith and stuff like that. But for most people, this is just religious yakety-yak. It's religious noise. It doesn't communicate anymore. And if anything, what it communicates is bad things because of misconceptions. And so this is one hurdle that we have to face. Well, people don't understand the gospel. I told a guy once, Jesus died for your sins, and he said, I'm sorry to hear that. Did he get better? You know, people don't understand it. Okay, so that's the first obstacle. Second obstacle, there's a whole bunch of folks in the culture, smart people, funny people, intelligent people, articulate people that are writing books and giving talks and going on radio and TV that are standing against us in everything that we believe. People like the new atheists, who some of you know about, and other people kind of riding the trend right now. They're everywhere. I walk through the airports all the time. I see their books popping out at me. Now, it isn't like everybody has read these books, but they're aware of the presence of these guys. And by the way, half of them have British accents, so they're even more convincing, right? And they're aware of the books, and they get the impression that the smart guys have lined up against us and found us wanting, and so this then keeps them from considering any claims that we might make anyway. No, I'm not interested in that fairy tale. The third thing, the third reason why I don't like go for the gospel, to sign in the dotted line, go for the gold, as a regular pattern, is because I can only tell you to do what I do, all right? And if I told you that you should be doing that, and that's the way most evangelism training is. Well, you'd take notes like you're doing, and you'd say, praise the Lord, and laugh at the jokes, and then you wouldn't do it. That is, you wouldn't go out and do that if you felt that the goal of your conversations had to be to somehow press for a decision. And I'll tell you why you wouldn't do it. It's because the idea of trying to close the deal is frightening for most of you. I am completely sympathetic to that. It's uncomfortable for me too. And then I had a revelation about 15 years ago. It just started coming together for me. And I realized that there is virtually always, before any harvest in anyone's life, any individual person who became a Christian, before that harvest was ready, there was always a season of gardening, right? Before the harvest, gardening. You just write that one down. There's a tweet. Before the harvest, gardening. That means we don't just need harvesters, do we? We need gardeners too. And in fact, I think I've met two people in my life that became Christians and went from 0 to 60 just like that. I don't know nothing. Tell me the gospel. That's the gospel I believe. I'm in. It happens rarely, especially in this country. Maybe in other parts of the world it happened, but not here. Okay, there is so much resistance, so much bad information that people just can't do that. We need more of what Francis Schaeffer called pre-evangelism, more tilling the soil, more gardening. And I realized, as I look back on my life, I'm not a harvester. I've led a few people to the Lord. I'm thankful for that. But most of the work that I do, whether it's speaking or on radio or any things that we do on our website, there's a lot there that we do at str.org, by the way. STR. Stand to reason. These are all gardening enterprises. And if I'm spending most of my time gardening and not pressing for decisions, then maybe you're gardeners too. When the fruit is ripe, it falls into the basket. Doesn't take much work. The work is in the gardening. That means we probably need more gardeners than harvesters. And if you're sitting on the bench because you don't think it frightens you to think about pressing for a decision, well, that might be because you're not a harvester. And it might be there's a great big job you can play to help everybody in the whole enterprise by gardening. And I want to help you to see how you can do that today. In fact, just a little note, if you mark down John chapter 4, you know it's the woman at the well. You might not have read how that ended. Jesus has this great encounter with her, and then she goes to the village of Sychar and brings people back. They're coming across the field, and I think this is what Jesus is referring to when he says that the harvest is right there, it's ready. There was a harvest in that day for those people, but he tells his disciples who had done nothing, you are about to reap where you did not what? Sow. You're going to benefit from what the sower, the gardener, has already done. Jesus, or maybe the woman at the well. And then he adds this, so that the one who reaps and the one who sows can rejoice together. Do you see how we're all in this together? We're all on a team. We don't always have to be harvesters. And if we think we do, we don't get into play. Why don't you think about yourself as a gardener? But with this in mind, I had to adjust my goal. And this is maybe the thing you can keep in mind that will help you. Instead of going for the gold, I have a different goal anytime that I engage another person about something I might hopefully have an impact in, spiritually speaking. And 4 weeks ago when I was at Texas A&M in Corpus Christi, I gave an address to an audience on the problem of evil. But before I started the way I always start whenever I speak to an audience of people who don't share my convictions, all right? And I tell them who I am and what I'm after. And by the way, if you're not a follower of Christ here today, I am really glad that you're here. But I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say, because this applies to you. A lot of the other stuff is kind of family conversation, and we hope that, some of it rubs off and something gets you thinking. But that's actually my point. Listen, what I say to the audience is, I'm here today because my life has been deeply changed by an ancient teacher. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. And 40 years ago, when I was a student at UCLA, I began to think more carefully about what Jesus said and the way he saw reality and the claim that he made in my own life. And after thinking about it a lot and talking about it and asking a lot of questions, I finally came to the conclusion that Jesus got it right, that he saw the world the way it really was. And when I realized that, I thought the smart money's on Jesus, I'm going to follow him. And I've been doing that for 40 years. Now, it has not been easy. I'm just going to tell you right now. But it's been right because it's been reality. And then I tell the audience, and this is my word for those who don't know Christ yet. I'm not here to convert you. And you can almost hear like a collective sigh of relief from the audience there at the university. I said, I got a more modest goal. I just want to put a stone in your shoe. I just want to annoy you in a good way, all right? And they all chuckle because they expect a Christian to annoy them. So I say, okay, I'm your man, but you'll thank me in the end. I want you walking out of the auditorium with something stuck that's bothering you because I got you thinking. Because I think that Jesus of Nazareth and the way he viewed reality and the claim he has on your life is worth thinking about. And then I move on with my material. And there it is. That's my goal. So I want to commend that goal to you because I think if I can just, in any conversation, give a little bit that moves a person a little bit forward, I got a whole team that's going to help me out, that in the sovereignty of God is going to pick that person up and take him the rest of the way. Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, does this guy ever get to the gospel in his system? When do you get to the gospel? Well, the answer, yes, I do. And when? Very simple. I get to the gospel whenever I want. I know it sounds a little cheeky, but let me clarify. I do not feel artificially forced because of some system telling me that every conversation has to end with an invitation. Jesus didn't do that, for goodness sake. I can take the conversations as they come to me, try to be wise and alert, shrewd, paying attention, trusting God that if I'm making myself available to him and he has a divine appointment there, and I don't think every encounter is a divine appointment, personally. Some people are just going to keep going, and maybe God's going to deal with them later on the line, but not every appointment. But I'm just trying to be alert for opportunities. And when the opportunity presents itself, then my goal in that opportunity is just do a little. Give them something to think about. Now, I've got some training, I got some background, I got more to put in the conversation that maybe you do, but you can take what you have, given the circumstance, and as you get more, you can put that in. That's That's the way we engage. That's the way you can sow. Paul planted, Apollos, what? Watered. And who's responsible? God causes the increase. But see, I'm able to do this now because I have a game plan. And I want to give you that game plan today. And here's my promise to you. In the next 20 minutes or so, that clock is really ticking fast, isn't it? In the next 20 minutes or so, I am going to give you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence in any situation. No matter how little you think you know, or how aggressive or intelligent or articulate the other person may be. This is a game plan that trades on the notion we find in Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. And here's what Paul says there. Colossians 4, verse 5 and 6. Conduct yourselves with wisdom towards outsiders, all right? Be smart. Make the most of the opportunity. Let your words always be with grace. That was a novel concept for some of us. Be nice. How about that? As much as possible. Seasoned, as it were, with salt, so you know how to respond to each person. And this is what I'm after here. Wisdom, alertness to the circumstances, and even though I'm going to give you a game plan that you can employ, it is still the kind of game plan that will allow you to be sensitive to the circumstances so that you know how to respond to each person. Now, let me give you an example of how this works out. I grew up in Chicago, and my grandpa was a lumberjack in the early 20th century in northern Wisconsin, and so when he retired in the 60s, he bought some property way up north in Wisconsin on a little lake and built we call it the cabin, but whatever you're thinking about when I say the word cabin, it isn't like that. It's just a place. We should probably call it the shack. But we love it, and it's very modest, and even after, 50 years, we're still going up there. I went there as a kid, spent summers up there. I like to fish. Now I don't get to do that very often, but I still take some time, late May, maybe early June, some July, I'll go up, and I also take my family up, too. I have little girls. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I know what you're thinking, like, that guy is too old to have kids that young. And you are right. So put me on your prayer list, all right? I got married late, 4 days before my 48th birthday, and our gametes were a little tired by then, so let's just say we adopted both of our daughters from crisis pregnancies. I'm thrilled with them, and they're good kids, and people tell me, yeah, I'll wait until they become teenagers, yeah. I said, if I'm lucky, I'll be dead by then. Got it all worked out. Well, I take my girls up to Wisconsin and we fish in the summer, but this particular day was before I had the girls about 10 years ago, and I went out with the local pastor and I caught the largest smallmouth bass I'd ever caught before. Now, I like bass fishing, and when I'm in the North Woods, I fish for smallies, and it was 4 pounds, 3 ounces, which is a really big smallmouth in that neck of the woods. However, I've caught 8 smallmouth, over 5 pounds now since then. So I've improved on my bragging rights. But I was so happy with that fish. I had him take a picture, and I was going to take it down to the local photo place to get it digitized so we could show it up on the screen at his church where I was teaching on Sunday, and I could flex my fishing muscles, for the rest of the congregation. They care about that kind of. They didn't care about my theological credentials. They cared about my bass, so. In any event, we took it in, and there was a lady at the counter there, my wife and I, and we handed it to her, and I noticed that she's wearing a 5-pointed cross, a pentagram around her neck. Now, a pentagram is oftentimes an occultic symbol. And so I asked her, does that jewelry have any religious significance? She said, yes, the points of the star stand for earth, wind, fire, water, and spirit. I said, well, I was a little familiar with that, but I wanted to know, did it have religious significance for you personally? Because sometimes people wear a cross and it's just jewelry. And she said, yes, I'm a pagan. Now, I've been in circumstances like this before. I'm a trained professional, so I just took it all in stride. But my wife, she'd never heard anything like that before, and she, like some of you, she laughed. And then she caught herself and she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. I just never heard anybody admit it before, She'd only heard the word pagan when her girlfriends would call the kids in, "Get in here, you bunch of pagans," that kind of thing. Well, the young lady was not offended, and she went on to explain this is an earth religion. And as she talked, I realized that I'm talking to a witch. And I asked her, "Are you a witch?" And she said, "Yes." "We respect all life" was the point of view that she offered. And I said, "Well, if you respect all life, then this would probably make you pro-life with regards to the abortion issue. And my understanding is most witches are pro-life for that theological reason." She says, "No, I'm actually pro-choice." I said, "Isn't that unusual for a witch to be pro-choice?" She said, "Well, it is a little bit." And then she qualified her statement. She said, these were her exact words, "I know I could never do that," referring to abortion. "I could never kill a baby." Her words, not mine. Now, at Stand to Reason, we have training material about abortion. It's called Making Abortion Unthinkable, the Art of Pro-Life Persuasion, in which, as a persuasive enterprise, we engage people thoughtfully with science and philosophy to demonstrate that abortion takes the life of an innocent human being without proper justification. Baby killing, if you will, but we don't use that language because we don't want people to dismiss us because we're using rhetoric to make our point, all right? But I wasn't the one who was calling abortion baby killing here. It was the person who was pro-choice who was referring to abortion as baby killing. Look, I want to tell you something. If you get nothing else from our time together here, please, I hope you get in your mind a conviction. You've got to listen to what other people say when you're talking with them, because they're going to give you all kinds of information that's going to help you in having a productive conversation. She is the pro-choicer who is labeling abortion as baby killing. Am I going to use the word abortion anymore now in our conversation as we talk about it? No. I'm going to take what she's just given me. She said, "I know I could never do that. I could never kill a baby." And then she gave the reason why. She said, "I wouldn't want something bad to come back on me." So I guess this is what goes around comes around. You do a bad thing, you get, but doesn't that strike you as an odd reason not to kill babies? I mean, I'm thinking, yeah, I can't kill any babies, but you never know what's going to happen to you when you start killing a few babies, Maybe it's just a good idea not to kill babies. Anyway, I asked her, "Well, you wouldn't kill babies." "Well, that's good. Maybe we should stop other people from killing babies." And she said, "I think people should have a choice." What's the choice we're talking about? The choice to kill babies in her own terms, right? And so I asked her that, "You mean people should have a choice to kill babies?" And she said, "Well, I think all things should be taken into consideration." I said, "All right, what would be a legitimate consideration to make it okay to kill a baby?" And she immediately said incest. Okay, now let's step back a moment and see what's going on here. We're having a conversation about abortion. She has already identified abortion, though, as baby killing, her words. But she is not thinking about what she's saying. She is trotting out all of the pro-choice slogans for abortion, but she is identifying it as baby killing in the process, and the conversation is starting to sound a little bit strange. But she doesn't hear it because she's not paying attention. She's sloganizing. Now, this happens all the time in our conversations with people, and it happens all the time by Christians, where we just trot out the slogans, and we're not thinking about what we're saying, and we get crosswise sometimes in the conversation because we're not explaining contentfully our point. And so I said, "Let me ask you a question. If I had a 2-year-old standing next to me who had been conceived by incest, then in your view, I should be able to kill this baby. Do I understand you correctly?" Let me ask you, do you think that is a fair application of her view? Absolutely. That is her view. Now, if it wasn't, does she have a chance to correct me? Yes. But she didn't correct me because it was her view. She paused for a long time and thought about it. And finally she said, "I'd have mixed feelings about that." And I'm thinking, about killing the 2-year-old? I hope so, you know. But she said it as a concession, you know, so I had her moving in my direction a little bit. I got her thinking. Maybe that was this stone in her shoe. Now, the line was growing behind me. And I realized my opportunity as Christ's ambassador had come to an end. My opportunity was finished. Now, had I been of a different frame of mind other than putting a stone in the shoe, if I thought I got to get to the goal line, I'd say, hey, folks, I'm not gotten to the gospel yet. Sit down, shut up. Maybe you learned something. No. I had the freedom to move on. I had the psychological freedom. I had the spiritual freedom to do what I could do, to garden, and then move forward and entrust that young lady to the Lord, who is sovereign, by the way. You think that the Lord loves this woman more than I do? You think he's more powerful than me? He got better Yes. So we entrust those people to the Lord. We move on. Pray for her, gone. It's great. This is the power of using the game plan. Using what we call a standard reason, a tactical approach. Now, in that conversation, I used 9 different questions. I used questions to open up the conversation. I used questions to gather information from her. I used questions to show a weakness or a flaw, or to at least suggest that to her. And in my notes, it says here, and she was doing most of the work. Well, I had to cross that out, because I got to thinking about it, and I realized she wasn't doing most of the work. She was doing none of the work. I wasn't doing any work. We weren't working. We were just carrying on. We were just conversing. There was no line drawn in the sand. There was no turf to defend. When she told me she was a witch, I didn't say, oh, a witch, and do the Monty Python routine. Stand back. I just took it in stride. No problem. Now, it stands to reason we have lots of tactics. The tactics are all contained in this book titled, what do you think? Tactics. Subtitle, A Game Plan for Discussing Your Christian Convictions. All right? I'm just going to be able to give you a little bit, a taste. I hope you get the book. They have them outside in the patio. I'll be signing when I'm done. I'll have a chance to meet you more personally then if you'd like. On Amazon, we have it at str.org. I want to give you a taste. I'm going to fulfill my promise, but there's a whole, that I'll give you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence, etc. But there's a whole lot more in the book. We have tactics like suicide and taking the roof off and just the facts, ma'am, and Rhodes Scholar. They all have names. They're all maneuvers in conversation, but there is one tactic that is the center of the game plan. It is more effective than any of the others to stop a challenger in their tracks, to turn the tables, to get them thinking, and to put you in the driver's seat. And this is where you want to be with a tactical approach. You want to be in the driver's seat, not to manipulate, but to manage, not to control or coerce, but rather just to ease the whole thing forward. That's the prayer, to finesse, so to speak, all right? And this tactic, which is the core of the game plan, has a name, and the name of the tactic is Columbo. Now, I realize as time goes on, there are fewer and fewer people who know who this character is. But I make a lot of flights back to the 60s and the 70s, because that's kind of where I live. Lieutenant Columbo, the famous lieutenant of TV fame 4 decades ago, shows up on a crime scene wearing a trench coat, right? Looks like he slept in it, like this one. I got my trench coat at Salvation Army. Whenever you get something at Salvation Army, you always want to check the pockets, because you never... Wait a minute. What's this? Oh my gosh, look it. Perfect. Lieutenant Columbo always had a cigar, right? Now listen, Fred, don't worry about this. This is a plastic cigar, all right? No problem. In fact, I hate real cigars. Whenever I find a real cigar, I always destroy it by fire. Completely. I don't want anybody to stumble, right? Lieutenant Columbo also has a pad of paper. He can't use his pad of paper, though. Why not? You know. He doesn't have a pen or a pencil. You know he's not prepared. He's got to bum a pencil off of somebody, and he's walking around looking at stuff, scratching his head. This guy doesn't look like he can think his way out of a wet paper bag. I mean, he's stupid, right? But he's stupid like a fox because he's got a plan. And at some point, he'll just pause for a moment and say something like this. I don't know. There's something about this thing that bothers me. Do you mind if I ask you a question? So he asks this question, he gets the answer back, and thank you you're very intelligent. One more thing. And then he one more tings them to death, right? Question after question after question. Pretty soon they get upset. And he said, I'm sorry, it's because I'm asking all these questions, but I can't help it. It's a habit. And this is a habit that you ought to get into. The key to the Columbo tactic is that the Christian goes on the offensive in an inoffensive way with carefully selected questions that advance the conversation. Let me say that again. The key to the tactic is that the Christian goes on the offensive in an inoffensive way with carefully selected questions that advance the conversation. Now, questions are powerful. For one, they're polite. You start asking people questions, general questions, draw them out. You want to know about them a little bit. You're showing interest in them, right? When you ask the question, who's doing most of the talking then? Hopefully. They are. Pressure's not on you. So interested is interesting. Everything's cozy. And you're getting information that could really be helpful for you to maybe step forward in some way, looking for an opening where you might be able to introduce some spiritual thing. So questions are key. Questions are your game plan. Columbo has 3 uses of questions. I am going to cover the first 2 uses of the questions, and I'm going to give you model questions in both cases, because all it takes is for me to cover those first 2 uses, even briefly, to satisfy my pledge to you, all right? Now, the third one, really important. You'll have to get the book. It's all in there, okay? Or you can go to our website. We have some things on it as well, but this will get you going, all right? What's the first use of Columbo? First use of Columbo is to gather information. Real simple, gather information. Columbo shows up at the crime scene. There's a dead body. How does he solve the crime? He's got to gather information. You encounter somebody that you would like in the Lord to have a spiritual impact on. Now what? You could start dumping a lot of spiritual information on them, which they just hear as religious yakety-yak, or you could begin to draw that person out and gather information about them. Now, I do this all the time. I sit in airplanes every week, and I'm getting, and I'm using my game plan. And, or maybe, look at when holidays are coming up. You know, some of you are cringing when you think about it because you know the people that are going to be sitting around that turkey or that ham or whatever it is that you have. And you know how it's gone in the past and it hasn't been that good, but you want to be faithful as a Christian. And this, for many of you, is the only opportunity you have to communicate these things. Now what? How about if you just plan for this year to gather information? That is, to get a more clear view on precisely what the people in your life think who don't agree with you. Is it not true that sometimes we're so earnest about communicating the truth of the gospel that we never listen to their side at all? It's going to be very difficult to speak to their needs, to know how to respond to each person if we don't have any information. So let me give you a model question that you can ask to accomplish that. Okay, here's the model question. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Not, what do you mean by that? That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying, what do you mean by that? Now, this is a model question. There's a lot of variation. Can you explain that a little bit more clearly for me? I'm a little confused about that particular point. Once I had a student come up to me and say, somebody said everything's relative. How do I answer the argument? I said, well, it's not an argument, it's just a statement. But you know how this kind of statement is meant to stonewall Christians, right? They say everything is relative and in response to us, and we say Ebony, 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 ebony. We don't know what to say, okay? How about this? Why don't we ask, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by relative? Now, I know what relativism is. I wrote a book on it, okay? But I'm not convinced they know what relativism is, all right? And by the way, once they explain, if they can, what they mean by relativism, I have another question. What do you mean by everything? How about that? Everything's relative? Listen, if everything means everything, isn't the statement everything's relative part of everything? Which would make the statement what? Relative itself. You see a problem there? That was just a little advanced peek at the suicide tactic, by the way. But you see, what work am I doing in that circumstance? I got to answer the question about relativism. No, I just ask a question. I ask the question and let them do the heavy lifting of explaining their view. And what? If I don't have an answer for it, once they explain the whole thing, then what? Well, then I just move on. But I move on with a lot more information than I had before, and it allows me then to be better equipped next time. And they've got a chance to share their view. I say, okay, interesting, now I understand, and move on. This is not a defeat. This is a step forward. The battle's not over yet in any of this. It's just a step forward, okay? You're, in a certain sense, to use the military metaphor, you're just testing the line, all right? If you're a Civil War fan, you know the skirmishers. They're testing the line. No, I don't like the military metaphors because sometimes they communicate a wrong attitude or engagement. But in terms of the elements, I think tactics, you know, the word there, I think that there's a propriety. Just remember that you always speak with grace, seasoned with salt, you know, that's going in there, all right? So you get information there. That's really, really helpful to you. I had somebody call me on my radio show, and I do 3 hours of radio every week, have done at least that much for 25 years. You can podcast it if you want. When I'm out of town, I tell people 3 hours, that's just one LA commute. And you know I'm telling them the truth, right? So it's not burdensome, okay? But I had a person call me on the show and ask me for a recommendation of a book on Buddhism. I said, why do you want a book on Buddhism? Notice that's a what do you mean by that question, right? I need more clarification. He said, I have a friend that I work with who's a Buddhist, and I want to tell him about the Lord, but I don't know anything about Buddhism, so I better read up on it. I said, no, don't waste your money. Why not? Well, you got to buy the book, then you got to read the book, then you got to understand the book, and then it may not even be the Buddhism he believes in anyway. I got a better idea. What's that? Grab your buddy, take him down to the local watering hole, and buy him a latte or something, and you ask him, I understand you're a Buddhist. I don't know anything about Buddhism. I'm a Christian. Can you tell me? What do you think he's going to do? How dare you? No, he's going to settle back and suck up his latte and tell you all about it. And you'll be getting a free education, well, save for the cost of the latte. The price is going up on those too, I guess. But a relatively free education about his Buddhism in the context of building a relationship with the very person that you want to communicate your own convictions with. Wow, what could be better than that? This is fabulous. This is a question you can ask all day long until the cows come home, all right? What do you mean by that? And you are just listening. You're gathering information. You're looking for an opening, possibly, and if no opening comes up, that's all right. You're properly educated for maybe the next time around. It's fabulous. There's no pressure on you at all. Now, I want to tell you about a liability that sometimes, or not so much a liability, but an oddity that you'll experience here. And the oddity is that sometimes when you ask the question, what do you mean by that? You get what I call the Simon and Garfunkel response. All right, who are those guys? Well, some of you know, I guess there's a resurgence, right? I see some gray hair. These are two fabulous songwriters and harmonists and lyricists from the 60s who wrote, and they're still alive, but they're really old now. So depressing when you see these. Because they were young when I was young, you know, and now they look really bad. So I stay away from mirrors. Anyway, they wrote a song called The Sounds of Silence. And so when you ask, what do you mean by that? You might hear the sounds of silence. Ironically, amazingly, some people cannot articulate what they mean by that because they haven't thought about it. People characteristically in cultures are socialized to believe what they believe. That is, they believe what everybody in their social group believes, and this is true in churches as well. Now, I'm not saying because they're socialized to believe things that the beliefs are false. I'm just saying this is the way they come to many of their beliefs, and many of people's beliefs are false, but they believe them because everybody else believes them. And they say the words that everybody else says that is adequate to stonewall Christians who then don't know how to respond. So when you offer, oh, well, what do you mean by that? They never heard that question before regarding their complaint. They don't know what to say. I had a young lady in Seattle, a waitress, and she said all religions are basically the same. She's pouring my coffee. Now, I could have launched into a preachment about the distinctiveness of Christianity over and against all other religions. I mean, I know that. But instead, I just asked her a simple question. What do you think that question was? What do you mean by that? Now, in that case, the variation was, she had said all religions are basically the same. I just said, in what way? So that's my variation. And I tell you, she was silent for so long, it got embarrassing. In what way are they different? Are they basically the same? And finally, I started feeling uncomfortable for her, and I started tossing out some suggestions like golden rule or something like that. When you ask that question, lots of times you're doing somebody a favor because it may be the very first time that they've ever really thought carefully about what they actually do believe. So here's our first step of our game plan. You're gathering information. You may just say, I'm just going to spend the next month or so right through the holidays. I'm not getting any arguments. I'm not going to try to win people to Christ. I'm in training. I'm going to be a gardener, and I'm just going to ask one question. What do you mean by that? And I'm going to get an education. But there's a second question, or a second use of Columbo. And the second use of Columbo is to reverse the burden of proof. To reverse the burden of proof. Now, what is the burden of proof? Burden of proof is the responsibility that someone in the conversation has to give evidence or reasons. It's the responsibility that someone has to give evidence or to give reasons, okay? Now, who in any conversation bears the responsibility, shoulders the burden of proof? Here's the rule. The one who makes the claim bears the burden. The one who makes the claim bears the burden. That is, if you claim something controversial especially, then it's your job to give some reasons why anybody ought to take that seriously. It's not the other person's job to refute you, okay? Now, let me tell you why this is so important in our conversations. Let's go back to everything's relative. Somebody says everything's relative. We think now it's our job, if we have the capability, to show, no, there is objective truth. There is absolute truth. Let me give you some arguments for it. But that's the wrong first step there. Because when we do that, we are giving the other person an absolutely free ride. That is, they can say anything they want against our view, and boy, now it's all up to us to do all the heavy lifting, and they just wait. And if we don't have the answers, they win by default. I think that's a mistake. In the immortal words of Ricky Ricardo, they got a lot of splaining to do themselves, right? I know, who's Ricky Ricardo? Desi Arnaz. Lucy, you cannot be on the show, that guy. The idea here is we're glad to hear their view. We're glad to get more detail on it, but they're not done yet. Once they give their controversial view, they got to back it up with some evidence, and that's what I want to know. And so here's my second question. Now, how did you come to that conclusion? Now, how did you come to that conclusion? Now, I'm assuming when I ask the question, looking for reasons for their view, that they actually have come to a conclusion and they have reasons for their view. This is not normally the case, and so don't be surprised if you hear Simon and Garfunkel again. Long silence. They haven't worked through it. I've actually had people tell me, well, I don't have any reasons for my view. Honestly, they said that. Then I have another question, right? Why would you believe something you have no reasons to believe in, you know? The guy said, well, I don't have any reasons for that either. There is so much you can do with these questions, and especially the second one. We are not going to let them tell a fairy tale to put our view to bed. We are going to force them genially, graciously to step up to the plate themselves and make sense of their view. You spend a month or so just asking the first question. Maybe in your own personal training, spend the second month asking the second question. By the way, I don't think you'll be able to wait till then because you'll be so excited hearing what people say and you wonder, oh my gosh, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Don't say that. But you're going to want to say, why would you ever believe a thing like that? And so you're going to get practice there. You're not going for the gold. You're not trying to close the deal. We're not even going to worry about that right now. We're going to garden. We're going to garden. And as we're gardening, look, you will never believe the kinds of things that God will do. I know this from my own experience and from 5 years with this book, people coming up to me and telling me all the transformation that has taken place in their life, even by using 2 simple questions. It's easy. It gets you going. It gets you into conversation. There's no pressure on you. It allows you to, those 2 questions allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, no matter how little you know or how aggressive, articulate, or educated the other person happens to be. See, I've fulfilled my promise, haven't I? It's not that hard. Now, there is a third step. I'll give you a hint. The third step is using questions to make a point. But in order to make a point, you have to know the point you're making, and that takes a little bit more education. This is what will get you started. And this is why Stand to Reason is here. We are here to help train ambassadors for Christ. On our website, we have thousands of pages of information. I mentioned the website already, str.org. I want to, stay in touch with you over time. I want to keep training you, even though I'm gone from here. So I want to tell you to do something that no pastor will ever tell you to do. Get out your phones and turn them on. Go ahead, you can do it. Rick's not watching. All right? And then I want you to go to your web browser and then type in these letters, www.str.org/signup. And there you see a form right there. Give us your name, first and last, please, because we index by last names. Put your email in there, put your address, let us know where we can send the material. We will send you free training material every single month. That includes our bi-monthly newsletter, Solid Ground, which, by the way, does not have pictures of our staff at bake sales, okay? It's not that kind of newsletter. You're going to get a hard-hitting article that I write or co-write with one of my other speakers that's going to help you deal with something right now in our culture, okay? On the alternating months, you're going to get a 1-page mentoring letter from me, which I try to mentor you as a better ambassador for Christ. That's what you're in for. Lots of other stuff on the website. You can sign up for the radio show there. You can go to iTunes and get the Stand to Reason show as well there. Lots of things. We got video clips like crazy, training materials, all kinds of stuff, but it's there to help you to be a better ambassador for Christ. We want you off the bench, right? And so this is my challenge to you. Get off the bench. Now you got a game plan to do it. And it's a game plan that allows you to converse with confidence with a goal of putting a stone in somebody's shoe. It's easy. Anybody here can do this. Listen, if you forget everything from this morning, just remember to take a tip from Lieutenant Columbo. Always what? Ask questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? That's your game plan. You don't have to hit home runs. You don't even have to get on base. All you have to do is get up in the batter's box, and those 2 questions will help you do that. All right. Lord, thank you so much for the time with this fine group once again. Always so much fun for me to talk to this energetic group of people who love you and are committed to the kingdom. Thank you for the time we've got to talk. This is a hard issue, Lord. We are being sent out into an increasingly hostile culture to stand for you, and we want to stand. We want to stand tall. We want to stand courageously. We want to stand confidently, and we want to stand intelligently. We want to make a case for our convictions so that people will take Jesus seriously. We need your help to do that. We can't do a single thing without your help. We pray that what's said today will bear fruit, and that fruit will remain for eternal life in the lives of the people here and those they contact. By your grace, according to your power, for your kingdom. Amen. Thank you.